City Council to order. Please join me in the council prayer. Dear God, today as the session opens, we pray that your presence will be before us and everyone who serves in the decision-making process of our city. We pray for direction which will lead our city to be strong and unified. May we continue the legacy of our founders. May we be granted this day the wisdom to make decisions which will be for the good of our city. We also pray for your special blessing on all those who are working to transform our city and make it a better place to live and work. Amen. Please join me now in honoring America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, good evening. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Milanazzo.
Here.
Councilor Murphy.
Here.
Councilor Broderick. Here. Councilor Caulfield. Here. Councilor Dakota.
Here.
Councilor Elliott.
Here.
Councilor Martin.
Here.
Councilor Mendoza.
Here.
Councilor Mercia.
Here.
9 present.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilor Caulfield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm requesting a moment of silence with darkened chambers for John P. Scannell, Sr., a loving and devoted husband, father, grandfather. Mr. Scannell served his country with pride and distinction during the Second World War as a staff sergeant in the United States Army. Mr. Scannell was a highly decorated veteran for his service in Normandy, on Omaha Beach, and throughout the European theater. After the Second World War, Mr. Scannell graduated from Franklin Institute with a degree in structural engineering. He later became president of Scannell Boiler Works, which was founded in 1860, and president of the Lowell Iron and Steel Corporation. He was also a member of many civic organizations, on the board of Notre Dame Academy, and an outstanding citizen of our city and the entire region. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Councilor Caulfield. Would my colleagues mind if I offered a moment of silence from the chair? I'd like to offer a moment of silence for Edward B. Masajewski. Mr. Masajewski passed away on May 19th. He was the husband of Genevieve Masajewski. In fact, they just celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary in April. He also served honorably in the United States Navy during World War II, and he was employed for many, many years by the United States Postal Service, actually working here in the Lowell Post Office. He was very active in his church, the Holy Trinity Church on High Street, where he served as a Eucharistic minister. He's survived by his wife and also his daughter Helene and her husband Stephen Clegg, his son Edward Masajewski and his wife Ann, and his son Paul Masajewski and his wife Mary Ann Masajewski, who most of us know as the Assistant Director of the Lowell Housing Authority. So I want to bring Mr. Masajewski's name forward as well for a moment of silence in darkened chambers. May we all rise, please. Thank you. May they rest in peace. First item, to accept the minutes of the May 17th meeting for acceptance by Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilor Elliott. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed to vote. We do have a request to take an item out of order, if we could.
Motion to suspend the rules.
Motion to suspend the rules by Councilor Elliott, seconded by Councilor Broderick. Roll call on suspension. Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
The item that we're going to be...
I don't think I voted.
Oh, okay. Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Under suspension, item number 6, to declare surplus and convey 6 Shattuck Street to Enterprise Bank for $5,200. In City Council vote, declaring the property at 6 Shattuck Street surplus and authorizing the city manager to sell and convey to Enterprise Bank and Trust Company the property located at 6 Shattuck Street, Lowell, and to execute all documents necessary for the transfer of the property. Whereas the City of Lowell is the owner of the property at 6 Shattuck Street, having acquired title thereof in 1941, recorded at Middlesex North Registry of Deeds in Book 957, page 243. And whereas since the appraised value of the property is less than $25,000, the disposition is exempt from the requirements of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30B, And whereas Enterprise Bank and Trust Company is the owner of the abutting property at 6 Shattuck Street, did submit an offer to the City of Lowell to purchase the property for the sum of $5,200 in order to create a passive park in honor of the bank's founder, George L. Duncan. And whereas the city manager has recommended to the City Council that the city accept said offer and sell and convey to Enterprise Bank and Trust Company the above referenced property. Now therefore be it voted that 6 Shattuck Street, Lowell is hereby declared surplus, and the city manager and the city treasurer be and they are hereby authorized in the name of the City of Lowell to sell and convey to Enterprise Bank and Trust Company or nominee as approved by the city manager for the sum of $5,200 on such terms and conditions as the city manager deems in the best interest of the City of Lowell, the property located at 6 Shattuck Street, Lowell, owned by the City of Lowell, and to execute all documents necessary for the transfer of the property, including but not limited to purchase and sale agreement, deed, execution and delivery, release of any demolition lien, and any other related documents pertaining to the sale and transfer of said property consistent with this vote. Be it further voted that upon conveyance, the vote, deed, and any and all related plans and any and all documents necessary for the transfer of the property shall be duly recorded in the Registry of Deeds at the expense of the grantee. Grantee shall also pay the stamp tax if applicable. Second reading by title in City Council vote, declaring the property at 6 Shattuck Street surplus and authorizing the city manager to sell and convey to Enterprise Bank and Trust Company the property located at 6 Shattuck Street, Lowell, and to execute all documents necessary for the transfer of the property. What's the wish of the council?
Approval.
Move for approval by Councilor Caulfield, seconded by Councilor Dakota. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mayor Milonazo.
Yes.
Councilor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Broderick.
Yes.
Councilor Caulfield.
Yes.
Councilor Dakota.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Martin. Councilor Mendonça.
Yes.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
8 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you. Thank you, representatives of Enterprise. Thanks so much. I didn't know if my colleagues, while we were under suspension, I guess I'll direct my question to Councilor Elliott, if we wanted to take up motions 12 and 13. I know we have people here from Livingston Street, and
I think that would be appreciated, Mayor,
Okay.
if there's no objection. Motion to suspend.
Second.
Okay, we'll continue under suspension. So the first motion by Councilor Elliott. Motion, request the City Council discuss the possibility of including Livingston Ave, Harvard Street, and Nicolette Street as part of the Tyler Park Neighborhood Historic District. Second by Councilor Caulfield. Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if residents, there are a number of residents that are here. Some registered to speak. If there was no objection, I'd like to ask to suspend the rules because some of them did not.
We're under suspension.
We're still under,
correct,
okay,
Correct.
all right. Did somebody want to come up and speak?
Is this on this particular motion or the next motion?
Well, I think they probably want to speak on both, but maybe I should have gave a brief explanation
Okay.
on this motion.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I filed this motion after getting emails from, a notification from residents on Livingston Street that a proposed development of a single-family home in the traditional single-family neighborhood didn't seem to be consistent with the historic character of that particular neighborhood, that being Livingston Street. I met with residents, I visited the street, and it's clear, to me anyway, that there are so many beautiful homes on Livingston Street, as well as Harvard, and people who have been living in the neighborhood indicated Nicolette Street as well has a number of historic homes, and the residents will speak to this, but many of the homes on Livingston Street date back to the 1890s, well over 100-year homes. So knowing that we went through a process and adopted a number of historic neighborhoods several years ago, I thought in order to prevent any development that's not consistent with the historic nature of this neighborhood, that we look into the possibility of extending the Tyler Park historic neighborhood, which I think is the closest neighborhood that we could probably include as part of the historic preservation of that area. So that is this motion anyway.
Thank you.
Hi, Roberta Burns, 40-year resident of 90 Livingston Avenue. I just want to give you a brief history of William Livingston and Livingston Avenue. William Livingston Sr. was born in 1803. He was a successful contractor who specialized in canal and railroad construction. He changed the course in his career, engaging in the wholesale trade of grain, lumber, wood, coal, lime, brick, and cement. In 1831, he purchased 120 acres of land from Mary Tyler, stretching from Wilder Street to Black Brook. He served in the Massachusetts State Senate from 1836 to 1837. He continued successfully in this business until his death in 1855. Upon his father's death, Mr. William Livingston took over his father's business, concentrating in the coal market. As his father before him, Mr. Livingston served in the state legislature from 1865 and went on to serve on the Lowell City Council as an alderman in 1867. He was also a member of the commission to build the Lowell Waterworks and on the commission to build Lowell City Hall, the building we are standing in tonight. The original 7 homes on Livingston Avenue were built in the late 1800s, the first of which was built by William E. Livingston and Mary King Livingston. The property, which originally faced the Merrimack River, still stands today. The 6 remaining homes were built to the south of Livingston Estate. These lots were sold between 1892 and 1893. Mr. Livingston sold the 6 original house lots for $1 apiece. He had a plan for the neighborhood. All front doors lined up perfectly with the house across the street. No laundry was to be hung in the yards, and he placed covenants on the original deeds: slate roofs, no more than 1 house per lot. These covenants have long since expired. Good for A&R projects, but not good for the neighborhoods. I remember the older generation of the avenue that came before me. Miss Hazel and Miss Goldie Gardner, Lowell school teachers who never stopped teaching. Miss Elizabeth Hemmerly, the street historian who passed her knowledge to the next generation. Who do we pass it on to? Mr. Aloysius Green of 107 Livingston Avenue, who wanted everyone to see the sunshine through the jewel in his stained glass window and the glow on his face when he relayed the story that Judy Garland stayed in his home. The properties of Livingston Avenue have a history dating back over 150 years. Every house in our neighborhood has a history. The neighbors of Livingston Avenue fully understand the legal aspects of an A&R project. In our zone, traditional, single-family, 7,000 square feet with 55-foot frontage. The project does meet these requirements, and we get that. What we don't get is how a builder can come in and destroy what we have lived for. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Goldman.
Mr. Manager, Mr. Mayor, members of the Lowell City Council, my name is Mark Goldman, 58 Oakland Street, Lowell, Mass. Wish to be recorded in favor of this. I believe that a new historic district, however, should be established, and it should be called Livingston Avenue Historic Neighborhood District. And it would go from the Princeton Boulevard area down towards Middlesex Street, and it makes more sense than having it as part of Tyler Park Historic or Wilder Street. But I think that something like this is important because we don't want to see any more of what's happening at 113 Livingston Avenue take place again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. What's the wish of the council? Council Caulfield.
Thank you very
Ryan.
much, Mr. Mayor.
Council Caulfield. Oh, I'm sorry. On the historic issue?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Okay. My name's Leanna Hall. I live at 100 Livingston Avenue. It's a picture of the house. I live there with my husband and 2 children. This is our 3rd historic home, so we're well versed in what it takes to maintain a house like this and upgrade it to modern standards. And let me tell you, it's a lot of money. It's a big investment that we've made in this house. From our 2nd level deck, we have a view of this new property, okay? So we bought this house because it offered breathing room. There are very few houses in inventory where you can have a historic home and breathing room at the same time. So to us, that means having a yard. It means having off-street parking, where a house as large as this can support a large family, and still we don't have a lot of cars on the street, and it feels safer and better for raising children. We're already impacted by, extra parking that's happening on the corner of Livingston and Princeton, which, there are a lot of issues related to doubling the density of this property, which is what's happening. So we're concerned from a quality of life point of view and also from a financial point of view because we have lost $250,000 of value in our house. So to do these large projects requires getting funding, which we can't qualify for right now. And a part of the problem was the sale of this house for under $300,000, which has now been carved up and sold for less. So we have increased density, lower value of our house, and our taxes, property taxes, keep going up. So things aren't adding up to us. We don't understand how this was allowed. And we're quite frustrated as residents who are willing to invest tens of thousands of dollars of our own money in this house and into the community of Lowell. We're quite frustrated. So, thank you. That's what I wanted to say.
Anyone else on the motion regarding the Tyler Park Historic District? Councilor Caulfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm certainly going to support this motion, but I question, are we going to have to make every neighborhood a historic district? Because what has happened on Livingston Avenue is a total disgrace. And you cannot put a dollar sign on the aesthetics that have been ruined on that street. And it's like a thief in the night. I was amazed when I drove down Livingston Avenue. I saw a foundation in the ground, and the building permit is going to come at a later date. Mr. Mayor, that's inconceivable. And I don't blame these people. They're my neighbors. I don't blame them for being upset. Those are beautiful Victorian homes that have been ruined because of this little single-family house that somebody looked through the pages of the law. I can get away with this. Well, I appreciate the fact that Councilor Elliott brought in this motion, but I question whether we have to make Foster Street and other streets and other neighborhoods to protect the people's rights. That's what I question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Caulfield. Councilor Elliott.
I think that's a good question, and I'm not sure what the answer is. But if we have to, in order to protect the historic integrity of neighborhoods that have historic value and character to it, then we might need to take a look at it. The reason why I filed this motion, in my opinion, if the permit was subdivided and this home had to be built to historic, similar to historic character in that neighborhood, it wouldn't be built. Because if you look at the plans, it's an off-the-shelf building plan. It'll be up in a short amount of time. It will have little resemblance to the historic buildings that are in that neighborhood. So I understand the motion, but if there are some other sections of the city that need to be protected and have some historical significance, then yes, we should take a look at those and put protections in place so this doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Elliott. Councilman Mendonça.
Just for the purposes of discussion, I tend to agree with one of the speakers, Mr. Goldman, regarding it being part of a Tyler Park district. It seems to be a distinct area and rather distant from it. So I'm not opposed to having a historic district in this area, but I think it might, unless there's a reason not to, that might consider creating its own individual district in that area for the same purpose.
Councilor Elliott.
Mayor, I can amend the motion. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter to me what you name it, as long as there is a historic overlay district in place to
Okay, the intent
prevent
of
this
the
from
motion
happening.
is a historic overlay.
So I can amend the motion to just have the manager, refer to the manager and come back with a recommendation, whether it's Tyler Park or if they want to create another zone, another name, that's fine.
Okay. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there are 9 historic districts in the city. I don't have a problem with naming 10, But I hope that this is the last, because I hope that this fiasco never happens again. And I'll talk about that in the next motion. But yes, I support this 100%, absolutely.
Any further discussion? All those in, Councilor Martin.
Just, sometimes, we do a lot in the city for affordable housing, low and moderate income housing, and, that's got its place and its need, but oftentimes we don't really do enough to protect, the larger home, the single-family home that these folks spoke about tonight, because, if we don't do that, those are the buildings that get carved up potentially into multi-unit buildings, and we've seen that happen in the Highlands and in other neighborhoods. So certainly this is a good idea, whether it's an extension of an existing district or standalone. I don't think anybody's going to quibble with that, and we'll accept the guidance from the manager on that. But it's something that the city needs to be vigilant on. No matter, it seems as many rules as we put in place, things slip through the cracks, and we just need to be as vigilant as we can to keep these things from happening.
Thank you. Councilor Dakota.
Thank you. I would just like to say that I support this motion. Wherever I am in the city, when I'm driving into the Highlands, I drive up Livingston Street just to look at the homes, and so it's important that we do preserve this for future generations, and I appreciate you bringing this motion forward.
Thank you. Anyone else? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed? It's a vote. Thank you. While we're under suspension, the next motion by Councilor Elliott. Motion, request the City Council discuss the building permit issued at 113 Livingston Avenue.
Second.
Second by Councilor Caulfield. Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. I said discussion specifically so we could have a dialogue on what has taken place. I think that neighbors, residents should speak first, because they have valid points, and they can present the issue in their own words.
Thank you. Those willing to speak on this motion? Mr. O'Brien.
Hi, Jim O'Brien. I'm at 101 Livingston, and this is my wife, Mary Ann O'Brien. And I have some sort of a prepared statement just from witnessing the process for the last, since the property was subdivided and actually purchased by Dutton Real Estate. First, I wondered if how many of the city councilors were able to drive down the street and take a look at the site, because there's nothing like seeing it in person, believe me. Lowell is a beautiful city. Livingston Avenue is one of the prettiest streets in Lowell. It's a wide street with big old houses, well-kept lawns, plenty of trees, and lots suitable to the size of the old houses. And it's a wonderful place to live. And now this. So I still have some questions about the process. And number one is, was there any way the city could have stopped this? If the answer is no, then we have a big problem. Because given the location of the project and the tiny margin for error on the lot, this project should have received close scrutiny by the city and residents. And for anyone who doesn't know, the approved building plan meets this 15-foot abutting property clearances for the TSF homes by 4 inches. This is the sum of the south and north lot clearances. And you can talk to David Fuller, the building inspector for this project, if you want verification. Now, if the city could not have prevented this, which what we've been hearing from the city is there's nothing we can do about these approval not required projects. That's, to me, an even bigger problem. Because this means that the city is unable to protect the neighborhoods from predatory real estate developers and speculators. And future projects, at least to my thinking, will get the same rubber stamp treatment. Mr. Fuller and Mr. Bakey have told us that the developer will be submitting an as-built plan. This is something that's prepared and stamped by a registered land surveyor. And this is supposed to show the location of the foundation as constructed conforms to all applicable codes, including zoning. And this is supposed to happen by early next week. According to Mr. Fuller, the land surveyor stakes his license on the accuracy and validity of this document. My question is, how is he staking his license on this if there's no independent verification of the lot and the foundation? I'd be willing to reimburse the city for an independent person to go out there and verify this lot. I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. It's this. We're talking like 4 inches. Point 3, this project alienates the longtime residents, as we've heard, of Livingston Avenue. It's almost like the city wants us to move to Chelmsford or Westford, or even Pelham, God forbid. So while the city promotes the revitalized downtown, they're neglecting neighborhoods like ours and Harvard Street. And I just want to say, if the city wants to push out the older established families so they can develop the neighborhoods, they're doing an excellent job. Just remember who's being pushed out. People with a real stake, people with good jobs and savings, long-time reliable taxpayers and property owners of Lowell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan. Anyone else want to be heard on the motion? Chair recognizes Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did go out and meet with the residents, and I did look at the lot, and I think Mr. O'Brien is correct when he said when you go out to see it, the impact of seeing the foundation on that site was, was pretty sad. I left the meeting wondering, what could we do? Why did this happen? How could it happen? I had seen some emails. I looked at the plot plan, and I couldn't understand how this took place because in 2004, the zoning subcommittee, with the assistance of the city, we sat through scores of meetings to prevent exactly what took place on Livingston Street. At that time, the zoning in the city was, the zoning and rezoning that was taking place was atrocious. So 7 years later, and I thought the city, I thought planning and development did a very good job. And so when I saw this, I figured there must have been a mistake. It could not possibly happen. We crossed our T's, we dotted our I's, and lo and behold, there's another development impacting a neighborhood, which is exactly what we worked to prevent. So I did see some communications from Mr. Bakey. Apparently this was one zone that allowed this to take place, and as I think Council Martin said, each time we put new rules, we put new regulations in place, it seems that developers find a way to break them or manipulate to their advantage. If you look at the plot plan, the lot line was skewed to meet the criteria of the frontage. I'm not sure how they're meeting the open space requirement. That's one question I did have. I do remember an ordinance that we adopted when we had a number of homeowners in the city just paving the entire lot. It looks like, I don't know what that ratio is, but that's one question I do have, Mr. Manager, for you or for Mr. Bakey. Did they meet that requirement? So I'd like to ask the manager or Mr. Bakey to respond to the residents' concerns and let people know how this was able to or permit that was issued for the foundation and the water sewer.
If I could recognize a couple of other councilors, and then we'll have
Okay.
the manager
Thank you.
and Mr. Baker respond. Councilor Mercia?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, too, as well, went to Livingston Avenue, having received a number of calls, a number of emails, and I wasn't surprised with what I found, because many, many years ago, this very same thing was going to happen in a Belvedere neighborhood on a particular street. The neighbors were up in arms about it. Everybody's home had a front door that was even with the street, and they were sliding this particular development in sideways, just like they did down Livingston Avenue. This was not a surprise to me because that was stopped. I don't know how this was stopped, but I did get a little information, as we all did. And I first want to thank Roberta Burns for the beautiful, historic, significant overview of the street. That was wonderful. But what I have to say is what's happening there is a little bit too late. We need to, but we can do something about the rest of it, because there are other properties, I believe, that are there that fit into the same category and the same circumstance, and the same thing can happen in another portion of that street and in that neighborhood. What you see there right now has diminished the integrity of the neighborhood, no doubt about that. It has reduced the value, in my opinion, and these people worked very, very hard to maintain their properties to the grandeur that it is, and this building that's going in sideways with the front door in the side doesn't make any sense. It diminished and reduced the beauty and the character of that neighborhood, and they're up in arms about it, and I don't blame them. And there's really nothing really that we could do about what happened today or whatever, when that happened, because they subdivided the property using a provision of the state law that allows certain subdivisions without a local hearing or any local discretion, called the approval not required subdivision. The approval not required subdivision, a state rule that they knew about, they knew the law, and they managed to slide this in like a thief in the night. There was nothing we could do about it, and we can't say that these people did anything wrong. They were only doing what was already there. All they have to do under this requirement is to show that they have sufficient frontage under zoning for 2 lots, and we have to accept this subdivision regarding of the zoning compliance. This approval not required rule must be eliminated. We could have done something maybe 6 months ago or whatever and revisited that and changed it. We didn't realize it. Now we realize it. Sometimes bad things happen for the sake of everybody else. I think what we have to do now is we need to further address some of the zoning changes, because we don't want this to ever happen again. We need to develop a more restrictive zoning by increasing the minimum lot area and frontage from perhaps 7,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. Increase the opportunity for notice and inform the abutters of the review of any of the projects that are proposed. And I'm going to tell you that this city council and this whole administration, we must get on the same page. As Councilor Frankie Dakota has a motion, and I'm not trying to jump ahead, but this is exactly what we need to do. Review and update the policies in order to improve abutters and neighborhood notification to all stages of the development. This that went through that rule didn't have to notify anybody. That's wrong. That's not transparency. We have to do that, and this is what this council is all about, because I don't want to see people coming up here after the fact and our hands are tied. We have to do something, and I don't really think it's up to the city to look at the zoning map and say, oh, this could be a possible subdivision. I know it's a lot of work, but maybe we have to start doing that. Maybe we have to see where in the city could this approval not required subdivision law come in. The state supersedes us through outdated rules like this. Like if Mr. Livingston had put that contract together and we supported it and advanced it every year, this wouldn't have been before us today. But it never happened. Laws lapsed and things changed. We have to change to put the more restrictions and notify abutters. We have to notify abutters. We have to change the law so everybody's on the same page. And that's what I have to say with this issue.
Thank you, Councilor Mercia. Councilor Caulfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the manager. Mr. Manager, when the city engineer, Lisa DeMayo, agreed to the subdivision, shouldn't that have raised a red flag with somebody? And through the solicitor, I want to know, on legal grounds, did the city engineer have the right to object to this subdivision?
That's apparently one of many things that we'll be looking at. I mean, generally speaking,
We should have looked at that before somebody agreed to subdivide the land.
what I'm saying is, right now, in terms of the discussion going on with the council, that's certainly one of the things that will be looked at. But go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, though, I think that to the question of when the city engineer looked at the plans, all she has as she looks at all the plans is, does it meet all the dimensional requirements? Yes, no, and it was as simple as that. And I think that to the comments that are being made, and I've been out to Livingston and looked at this as well. I didn't speak with the residents, but frankly, I too was shocked. But it does meet the requirements under the zoning, and as Councilor Mercia pointed out, it does meet the requirements under the A&R provisions of the state law. But in our hands are tied, and I understand that, some of the comments that have been made by the abutters regarding this issue is, could the city have stopped this? Our hands are tied as well, because we have to comply with the law. And the law...
If I could interrupt you for 1 minute, Mr. Manager, what about the curb cut? There's no curb cut.
Mr. Bakey, can you speak to that?
Doesn't the city have to approve a curb cut? There's no curb cut. I was there, I have pictures on my phone, there's no curb cut.
Yeah, I've also been by the property a number of times. In fact, Livingston Avenue is one of the streets that I choose to run on as a Highlands resident because it's an attractive street. So I agree with many of the things that have been said this evening. The curb opening permit would be something that would be issued at some point in the process before they'd be able to have an occupancy permit for the building. But it is not a prerequisite for either the approval not required subdivision or the issuance of the permits that have been issued so far on the property.
Well, it almost seems backwards, but... I'm sorry, Mr. Manager, I interrupted you.
No,
You finished?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not finished. Mr. O'Brien posed a very important question. And I've heard some of my colleagues say, there's nothing we can do. We just have to live with it. You know what? There is something we could do. Why isn't it the city's responsibility to take these developers head on? And what I'd like to see happen, Mr. Manager, is bring an outside surveyor, go up there and survey that property to make sure, Mr. O'Brien said it's 4 inches. 4 inches. I'd like to see that happen. They have an independent surveyor go up there and make sure that property meets all the legal requirements. And I want the law department to research everything they can think of and tip over every stone and every leaf to find out if we can stop that project. It's disgraceful. That's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Caulfield. Councilman Donza?
This is reminiscent to me of a development that happened at Woodward and Wright, where there was a fairly substantial yard that they took, and we thought maybe the one house would go up on. Next thing we know, there's 2 foundations, one of which is facing the back of the other house, well, the side, I guess. And I thought that we had changed zoning requirements to address things like that so they wouldn't happen again. So I'm wondering now how those changes don't apply to this. Also in the article, it stated that they were able to get a permit for foundation without any postings, and then that the building permit comes after. And that seems ludicrous to me, that you would think that if you're going to build, you have the entire plan laid out and get it approved. Why would you put down a foundation and not know that a building will be approved for it afterwards? That seems ridiculous to me. So something needs to be done with the process so that when they go for approvals to build on the lot, that everything, including the curb cut, is addressed before they put in the foundation. If there's any reason why it can't be built, why have a foundation in it and then decide that it can't be built? So I'd like to see the process reviewed and tighten it up so that, I mean, it seems to me that it would benefit the builder as well to know up front that you have everything done. And I agree with the notification process. Whether it's a foundation or a building permit, the same notification process should apply. So the neighbor should know before it happens that it's about to happen and have a chance to go down to a zoning, well, in this case, there was no requirement needed, but there still might be some grounds for objection. They could put it before a board that then they could have their concerns heard. So I'd like the process reviewed, especially with respect to the foundation and why that's notification is needed, and they can get that separate from the building permit.
Mr. Manager, and then Council Broderick.
Okay, I think Mr. Bakey can address many of these issues with regards to the, I believe these are all in ordinance. It isn't the internal process. It's the building office or the Inspectional Services Division basically complying with the ordinances that have been approved by the city in the past. But I know that I didn't see Councilor Broderick speak, so.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that going forward, speaking just in going forward, that we have to realize a couple things. The state has the state law, approval not required, the A&R, but it's my understanding, and Madam Solicitor, correct me if I'm wrong, that they apply our code, and if it meets our standards that we set in our zoning code, that's why there's no approval required. So I think if we want to look at this, I think, and be effective, we have to revisit our own code. And in looking at this, I think I'm the chair of the zoning subcommittee. I'd be more than happy to call a meeting if that's what the council would like, and start looking at this. But I think it's been 4 or 5 years since we revamped the code in response to development a number of years ago. But I think that if we do that, we ought to, Mr. Manager, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the manager, involve the neighborhoods, because it's difficult for all of us to drive around the city and look for areas that we think should be protected. But people that live there in this day and age now can send emails, and I think we ought to encourage folks to contact Mr. Bakey or somebody to sift through these and see where the weak spots may be that we want to protect, and we have to prioritize that. And I think we should revisit our zoning and determine, how much more restrictive we want to be in what areas. What may work in the acre may not work in Pawtuckaville, and I think we have to, this tells us that we need to revisit these things, and whether it's establishing more historic districts or just revamping our code in conjunction with the citizens and the neighborhood groups and people that, we can get a lot more feedback these days than we were able to 10, 20 years ago. But I think we have to realize that the zoning code is our code. We have to fix it if we think it's broken, and the A&R, the state law, it wouldn't apply if we had a more restrictive code. So I think that's a decision we have to make going forward. Thank you.
Before I recognize the manager, I'm going to recognize Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow up with Councilor Caulfield's comment, I realize, the building department has to rely on certified plans and stamped plans, but, I think I would think it's in the discretion of the building inspector to spot check those every once in a while, especially in a case where you're talking about inches in it. And so I think that's hopefully well within the right of the inspector to verify some of these things that are being done. You know, if they're going to take advantage of the rule down to the inch, then we should hold them to that and make sure that it's really that way.
Thank you. Manager Lynch?
If I may just speak to a number of points that have been made, but particularly the comments that just were made by Councilor Broderick, I do think that if you look back at the city's development over the last 10 plus years, there are a number of locations in the city going back around that time where there were problems, infill developments that simply didn't make sense, and the zoning's ordinances were tightened up, as Councilor Elliott pointed out, that to address some of these issues. Unfortunately, as some of the councilors have already pointed out, is often the case. Even after the zoning is changed again, assuming that's the process that the council wishes to move on this, there are going to be more issues that come in the future. There will always be someone who uses whatever is on the books to squeeze something in or do something that seemingly doesn't make sense. I think we've gone, certainly over the last 4 or 5 years that I'm aware of, there have been projects that have taken place, but nothing of this type has, because the zoning had been changed 4 or 5 years ago and prevented this type of the type of infill development that the city was trying to avoid. So I do think that it makes sense to head down that road. I just want everyone to know that, you know, 4 or 5 years from now, there's going to be someone else that's going to try to sneak in and use the language that's there to get something done. So, but obviously we need to be proactive and try to get out ahead of this. And unfortunately, that is often difficult to do, and it takes a project like this that brings everyone's attention to it. And then to Councilor Martin's comments, yes, it is certainly within discretion, and we will certainly be looking at that.
Thank you. Councilor Caulfield?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to belabor the issue. Mr. O'Brien brought forward a request to have an independent surveyor go up and check the measurement of that lot. Will that happen, Mr. Manager?
We will look to do that, yes.
You will. Thank you. And have the law department research every legal aspect as to why that project should not go forward.
Well, we will make sure, let me put it in these terms, we will make sure that it's in full accordance with all provisions of the zoning code of the City of Lowell.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the motion? Councilor Elliott?
I just had a couple more issues or questions. I think that's good news, Mr. Manager, that given that variance, given that margin of 4 inches, people make mistakes all the time. And to take a second look at that makes a lot of sense. I was really under the impression that when we did adopt the zoning code back in 2004, that there was a full notification process in place, whether it was a subdivision, whether it was a special permit going to the Zoning Board of Appeals, even when a building permit was going to be, or foundation permit was going to be pulled, that there was going to be a placard posted on that particular, on the lot that was going to be developed. So before any permit was issued, before a bulldozer was on site, the residents would have ample time to be notified and to take action or find out what is going on that site. Has that changed, or why didn't that at least occur? I think we're all under that. I thought we were all under that impression.
I'm going to ask Mr. Bakey to speak to that. I think you're right, but again, tightening up of the ordinances is the issue.
I think this is another example. As someone who was very involved in that process in 2004 when we did rewrite the zoning, a large part of the impetus behind that was actions taken by developers in a lot of the neighborhoods to do things that were in conformance with the zoning that was in place at the time, but were not welcome, were not consistent with the vision that the community at large and certainly the neighbors to those properties had. And so the objective of that rezoning process was indeed to do what was reasonable and responsible to try to preserve neighborhood character. and literally go through the city on a block-by-block basis and assign zoning districts to every block of the city that reflected the existing character in terms of general dimensions of the existing properties that were on that block. And the result of that is twofold. One, it is unlikely in most cases that a new property could be built that was radically inconsistent with what was on that block. But two, that if indeed there was a property already on that block that was noticeably larger than the others on that block, it would still be possible potentially to subdivide it. Now, Livingston Avenue is an interesting example in that the dimensional character of the lots at the south end of the block, closer to Middlesex Street, do differ from the ones at the north end of the block where, I'm sorry, the north end near Middlesex, the south end near Princeton, where this particular subdivision took place. And the zoning that was applied at that time was more consistent with the character of the Middlesex Street end of the property and less consistent with the character at this end. So one of the things that I've had some correspondence with some of the neighbors about, and based on what I'm hearing tonight, there may be some interest on the part of the council, is whether to look at rezoning either half or all of that block to reflect the character of the south end, the Princeton Street end, which would have the effect of reducing the likelihood of something like this in that particular block going forward again. I can say that in the vast majority of cases across the city, there are numerous projects that we will never see as a result of the zoning that many members of the council who are here before us this evening voted on in 2004. We will never hear about those. There will not be a lengthy discussion at any city council meeting because the zoning is effective at achieving that goal of preventing projects from happening. But there are a lot of properties that something under the zoning prior to 2004 could indeed have happened, and we could have been having this type of conversation about. I also would like to echo some of the comments that were made earlier that whatever rules do get written, whatever they may be, there will likely be some case somewhere in the future that is again unpalatable, and then it will therefore be our job to try to again address changes to the rules that will bring it more into consistency with what people's objectives are. For example, the Woodward and Wright property that was mentioned was one of a handful that really dominated the conversation leading to that 2004 zoning. That could not happen under the zoning that's present today because of that process. And I imagine if one of the products of this is a change to the zoning on Livingston Avenue, you will not be likely to see one of the other properties in the surrounding area subdivided in a similar manner. Now, that said, just to give a little bit of background on some of the things that happened leading up to this particular project and how this particular project was permitted. The first question that many have raised is how was the lot subdivided in the first place? And I think there's been a fair amount of discussion of the approval not required process, and that is indeed how it was subdivided. The approval not required process is actually an exemption that's written into the state definition of a subdivision, and it's that definition that empowers us as a municipality through our planning board to regulate and review and approve or deny subdivisions. But if in the definition of what is a subdivision, the state exempts certain things, we can't apply that review process. We're not allowed to. And that's where this approval not required comes into play. And I have joined a number of planners across the Commonwealth, probably almost unanimous among planners, trying to get rid of this because indeed this is an excellent example of how it prevents you from having the kind of proper review and discussion of a project at a time when it has not yet begun to happen, when you can actually have some kind of an effect on it. But so far we've been unsuccessful. I actually submitted testimony last week on the latest bill trying to advocate for addressing that. Hopefully we'll have more success this time around. Not only does the approval not required statute prevent you from going through the normal subdivision review process with the public hearing and so forth, it is extremely restrictive in terms of what we can look at. And in fact, we've actually made up a stamp that we apply to these plans that basically say the signature does not reflect the endorsement of this plan does not reflect a review for compliance with zoning, because we can't. We have to approve it if it meets two very simple standards and one even simpler third standard. And the first is that, and this is where Councilor Broderick's comment is correct to some degree, that we set the frontage requirement. That is the one aspect of zoning we can look at on an approval not required plan. And that is, does it have the frontage required by zoning? The lot can be completely non-conforming in all other respects, and if it has the frontage, we have to endorse that plan. And the next thing we look at is, what does it have frontage on? If it has frontage on an existing street or a street that's been approved previously by the planning board or a public way that's been approved, even if it's not yet built, we have to endorse that plan. We have no discretion in the matter. And the third test is just there has to be adequate access, and the courts have found that to be an extremely difficult hurdle to overcome, that you can actually access the property by way of that frontage to that street. So that's all we are allowed to look at. So when the associate planner and the city engineer looked at this plan last fall, that's all they were allowed to look at, and it conformed to that. So they had no authority or discretion or any ability to deny it. Had they denied it, the petitioner would have been able to just basically appeal that and immediately overrule the denial. Had they ignored it or rejected it, it would have been constructively approved after 21 days. So there's very little we can do other than adjust that frontage dimension. And the question there just becomes, how far do you want to adjust that? Because while you are in some ways preventing subdivisions, you are also potentially preventing things that you may want to see in terms of economic development and other development in the city. And it's a balancing act. And it's always one we're going to constantly be adjusting, and I would expect that we would continue to adjust. The next question was, how did the project get a foundation permit without a posting? And while the council, it was actually subsequent to the 2004 rezoning, it was a few years later, the council enacted, I think, a very good local ordinance to require notification, posting and notification for projects, typically projects that require the review through some sort of a board. There's a requirement that a sign be placed on the property in advance of the public hearing. So in addition to the notices that get sent out, there's a sign on the property so people can relate the property in question with the project. It also included a requirement that we notify property, or we notify with a posting if someone's applying for a building permit for new construction, with certain accessory buildings exempted and certain zoning districts exempted and so forth. It is not clear, the ordinance I think could stand to be tightened a bit, whether and to what degree it would apply to a foundation permit. And I think that's something, one of the takeaways from this that we may want to look at collectively, is making sure it is clear that it's actually the foundation permit that would trigger, not the building permit. In fact, in this case, it's a little bizarre, but they did indeed post the property for the building permit, but at that point the foundation was mostly already constructed because they already had the foundation permit. And the next question was, why do we do a foundation permit and then a building permit? Well, that's actually built into the state building code. That's not a local choice. And the reason that's built into the state building code to separate those two is basically that, exactly for the question that's been raised this evening, which is the requirement to locate the foundation and make sure that the foundation is placed in the correct location, and you have an opportunity to essentially do that. And it is indeed the normal convention that is a requirement and an obligation of the petitioner or the proponent of the project to hire a registered land surveyor who will, based on, basically at the risk of their stamp and their professional licensure, certify that indeed the foundation has been placed where it was supposed to be placed before we issue the building permit. And that's actually the stage that this particular project is at right now. They have the foundation permit and they have it constructed. They're in the process of hiring their surveyor and having their surveyor certify the location of that foundation. They will then submit that to us, and we will not issue the building permit until we have that evidence. And I understand from the discussion this evening, there's a desire to have the city find a way to hire another surveyor to confirm that, and obviously we'll look into seeing how we can do that. The city does not presently have a registered land surveyor on staff, so that's something we will have to contract out, which would become an impediment in doing it all the time, but we can certainly take a look at it in this case.
If I could ask Mr. Bakey a question, just from memory now, the sign, as I recall, says reads, a public hearing and/or a building permit will be issued on May 23rd. Now it's May 24th, and now you're saying the building permit has not been issued.
That is correct. Yes.
And why would it say a public hearing and/or a building permit? That to me was misleading.
I agree that that is not clear, and I can only speculate that it is the product of a builder or a sign maker using a template, because again, the majority of these signs get erected for projects that do have a public hearing before some land use board. And this is one of the rare instances where a project is possible that does not require any of those hearings. And I think, and again, it's only speculation, but I would speculate that that's the reason why it says that. But I agree, it's not ideal language.
Thank you. Council Caulfield?
Just a few more questions. Thank you, Adam, for explaining that. You indicated you went down to the State House and testified before the House and the Senate on this particular state law?
Actually, I submitted written testimony.
Written. What if the council took about and sent in a homo petition to the legislature, the House and the Senate, indicating that this has to be changed, not only for Lowell, but the entire state?
I think that's certainly something that the
Then I will
council
bring that
can and
motion
should
in
do.
next Tuesday to make that happen.
It's Senate Bill 1008 is the one that I testified on.
And furthermore, Mr. Mayor, I went by that construction site tonight before I came here. Have they received a street opening permit? Because I saw a soil pipe there, and it looks like they're ready to tie in the sewer. Have they?
I don't know if they have actually received the permit, but I do know that the water department, the wastewater department, and the city engineers did review their utility plans for how they were going to connect the water and sewer for the property. I don't know, again, if the permit has actually been issued, but I do know that they approved the plans.
Well, you know the shame of it, Mr. Manager? Everything's been approved for this developer. And it's a radical shame that this developer, and I know I'm not criticizing anyone, but the developer is getting the red carpet treatment, and the people who live there have to look at this little single-family home forever, and it's going to just ruin the aesthetics of Livingston Avenue and that entire neighborhood.
Mr. Manager, then Councilor Elliott.
If I may, Councilor, I just want to be clear. No one's receiving a red carpet treatment. There's a process that that they have to follow in accordance with the laws of the city, and we can't withhold that because of their legal rights. And I understand the people's rights on this, and they have legal rights on this as well. So we walk that fine line of making sure that all rights are abided by. But I just want to assure the public and assure the council that there is no developer that gets a red carpet treatment here in the city of Lowell.
I probably should withdraw that statement.
But I understand your frustration.
But you know what, Mr. Manager? What frustrates me? Last fall, I rebuilt my front porch. I could not remove one piece of wood, one nail, nothing, until I had a building permit.
Yeah.
And I asked for a building permit, received it, and paid for it. But I couldn't do a thing on that front porch. And yet you have a man who installed a foundation, and to rub salt in the wounds, as the mayor pointed out, the building permit is forthcoming. I said, there's something radically wrong here. It doesn't make sense. And that's why the people on Livingston Avenue are mad.
Rightfully so.
Councilor Elliott, then Councilor Mercia.
Two things. I believe the notification process is one way of policing all of the 26,000+ pieces of property in the city, because the city cannot possibly do it. We have looked at rezoning all of them. Apparently, some have fallen through the cracks. That's why I thought it was important, and I was under the assumption that there was a full notification process for anything in the city, any building permit, before a lot was going to be subdivided, before there was going to be a hearing, abutters had to be notified. And I think that's the frustration of the neighbors, is that in the middle of the night, unbeknownst to them, permits were issued, rightfully so or not, and it was almost too late. There was nothing that they could do. I put myself in their position. There's no way for them to stop anything if they don't know what's going on. So at the very least, I understand the A&R issue. At the very least, we certainly should weigh in and move forward with sending a message to the general court, people in the legislature, that this exemption, we need to eliminate this exemption. It's destroying our neighborhoods. We do know better in the community. Neighbors know better what is appropriate and what is taking place. And it gives local control to development projects, to ordinances and zoning. So I think at the very least, Council Caulfield was going to file a motion next week. I think while we're here, that we should, I'd like to make a substitute motion that we request the solicitor prepare language of a home rule petition, to send it down to there's already bills being filed. Why do we have to wait? I think that's, first and foremost, the manager's going to take a look at, as Adam Bakey indicated, was the foundation was the land surveyed accurately, and is the foundation set appropriately and according to the plan? So I think there's a number of things that we can do, including filing a home rule petition to the legislature to let them know this needs to be changed.
Is that the form of a substitute motion?
Was that my motion?
That was your motion. Would you like to second it? It's substitute motion?
Yes, second.
By Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Rita Mercia. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's quite evident that we could say that this parcel of property slid under the approval not required status. That's a given. Now, I could say to Adam Bakey in the planning department or the building inspector, the building department, how many pieces of property would fit under this approval not required status? But we have no way to know that because, we won't know it until it comes before us. But they have to fall under certain guidelines in order to qualify. For example, they need a certain setback requirement. They need a formula that would comply and eliminate the exemption. Let us increase the frontage from 7,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet, and they won't be complying, and they won't be under this. Is that possible?
Again, in this case, what may be valuable for this particular block of the city is to consider rezoning it from the traditional single-family, which requires 55 feet of frontage and 7,000 square feet, to the suburban single-family district, which requires 10,000 square feet and 75 feet of frontage, I believe.
Well, there you go.
That is
There's your
potentially an
answer. Let's do that so that we don't have this happen again.
Thank you. Just so we're in safe ground here, is that substitute motion in order, Madam Solicitor?
It's, the underlying motion again was what?
The underlying motion was that the council discuss building permit issue at 113 Livingston Avenue.
Right. As a sort of side note, I guess, the manager through the administration could certainly look at what's possible with respect to filing legislation. There may be some issues with respect to preemption as it relates to state zoning, but we could also look to, in the alternative, if that were an issue that we were anticipating, we could also potentially bring forth just a letter of endorsement for the bill that's already pending by the council, supporting that as well. So both things could be looked at. We don't necessarily need necessarily a motion to do that.
Okay, Manager Lynch?
I do think that, I think the question as to the appropriateness of the motion is, given the open meeting law requirements and all of the rest is questionable. But let me say that I will bring in I'm happy to hear that the council wants to support the testimony that Adam provided last week, and I intend to bring in a motion for the council to adopt a letter of support for the position that has been stated.
You'll withdraw your substitute then, he'll bring that in, okay. Okay, thank you.
And if I may, just one last point from my perspective. Again, as Mr. Bakey pointed out, there is that separation in the state law regarding the foundation permit and the building permit, and there's a reason for that, and that's the reason we're at right now. And again, we will review, as we do all projects, to ensure that they do meet the requirements with the foundation that's been put in place there.
Thank you. Council Mercia, then Council Mendonça.
Then how do we fit in this motion to change the zoning from a traditional single-family to a suburban?
We don't this evening, Council Mercia.
No, but could we do it in the future?
We could do it we could certainly, working through the administration, take a look at that, absolutely.
All right.
Because, again, I think that's a step in the right direction, but I just want to make sure that we're on legal ground here.
So we'll put it on the agenda for next week.
Okay. Council Mendonça.
I certainly understood the explanation about why they allow the foundation permit and then a building permit, and that's fine, but we still need some notification to be added to it, like the other building permits. And I'm not sure it's such a clear line, because in the building process, we have to inspect the plumbing and electrical and other things before they can proceed. The same thing could be applied to a foundation. Yes, you have to complete it. It has to be ascertained that it's correct before you actually put on a structure on top of it. It could still be lumped together, I think. But I think the important aspect of is that the notification be there before the foundation shows up.
Mr. Manager?
And again, I think it's the administration's position that, again, these are the fine tunings that need to take place in the zoning ordinance that we will bring forward with recommendations.
So the bottom line here is that we obviously will support the motion, but at the same time, we are going to get an independent survey of that foundation.
Mr. Mayor, just one last question. The motion for the home rule petition, that's going to happen,
The
right?
manager's going to have a document in front of us next week to support.
All right, I would have brought the motion in tonight, but I didn't think you
I
could
understand.
do that, so
Right, I
as
understand.
long as it's in there.
Yep.
And we'll
It'll be-
vote on that next week.
It'll be on the agenda next Tuesday. Councilor Elliott.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I have one more question on the A&R. Is there a 24-day appeal period on an A&R?
Mr. Bakey.
I honestly don't recall if it's 24 days or 21 days or 30 days, but there is an appeal period after an A&R plan is endorsed that people have the right to appeal. Again, one of the, frankly, flaws in the A&R exemption process is what was pointed out by some of the neighbors in this case, which is if there is no public notification process associated with it, it's very difficult for someone who may wish to appeal it to even know to appeal it. But again, that's something that really is unfortunately beyond local control in these matters.
And I think that is the essence of the problem, that there is an appeal period, but if the residents don't know that a lot has been subdivided, how can they appeal anything, whether it's 21, 24, or 30 days? It's mind-boggling that this law is in place. I'm sure Lowell is not the only community that's affected by this, that lots are subdivided. Nobody can appeal it because no one has to be notified, so.
Right, because if I may, when it's approved, there isn't any requirement that a building permit be pulled within a certain period of time. So it can be done, and those days go by. There's no notification, so therefore nobody knows, and the time slips by.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the original motion signify by saying aye. Opposed to vote. Thank you. Thank you all for being here this evening. Before we go back to the regular agenda, does it make sense, while we're under suspension, to get the report of the Public Safety Subcommittee before we go back to the unfinished business, which is the actual ordinance that was talked about at the Public Safety Subcommittee? So if we want to do that, the chair would recognize Councilor Caulfield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The Public Safety Subcommittee convened a meeting this evening at 5:30, and in attendance was Mayor James Milanazzo, Councilor Rita Mercia, Councilor Joseph Mendonça, Councilor Patrick Murphy, Councilor Bill Martin, Police Chief Ken LaValle, Solicitor David Fenton, Henry Marchand, representing the manager, Councilor Kevin Broderick, and I believe I said Councilor Bill Martin. And also, we had the animal control officers, Bill Potter, Robert Pickard, and we had representatives from the MSPCA and the Lowell Humane Society. And we had many people who spoke from the audience. Solicitor Fenton, who has done much work on this issue, he deserves much credit. He recommended that we amend the verbiage on page 7, subsection K, 3 lines 6, 7, and 8, strike out the words "to the animal control officer" and substitute, therefore, the words "to the city clerk." That's for the fines. The fine should go to the city clerk. The subcommittee took a roll call vote, and it was unanimously decided that this amendment should happen. We had much discussion, as we've always had on this issue. Animal Control Officer Robert Pickard had concerns. What is good for one animal should be good for another. Ken Favreau indicated there could be a liability problem. And Councilor Rita Mercier, not enough coverage in our city animal control officers. And the subject matter that I'm talking about, that the animal control officers indicated in the ordinance that the solicitor brought forward, on page 7, section A, a dog which is placed with a person by the Lowell Humane Society and which has received safe dog training shall be exempt from the muzzle provisions of section 104-291. And Councilor Elliott made a motion to bring the ordinance forward as presented and give it to the council to send it to a public hearing. I am against section A. I let that be known. And what that section A has done, as far as I'm concerned, and many other people, it has watered down this ordinance drastically. And I'm not just going to go along with this just to say we have an ordinance. Because what's going to happen here is the Humane Society is going to train dogs and then let the citizens of the city take the dog, indicating the dog is safe, it won't harm anyone. Yet, you're going to have other people in the city that have a pit bull that must have a muzzle. It's going to be bedlam. You're going to have more appeals and meetings and so forth. And the question that I posed, and no one has come forward and answered that, who would be responsible? Who would sign a certificate? What organization or what employee of the city, for all that goes, would sign their name saying that this dog I just gave to a family on Weston Street has been safely trained and it won't bother anyone? That has concerns. So, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you for your hard work and the committee's work, the subcommittee and so forth. But as this ordinance is being presented, I cannot support it because I just feel strongly that you're discriminating and the ordinance is not as strong as the paper that it's written on. Thank you.
Anyone else?
If any of my colleagues want to speak on it, fine.
Councilor Elliott?
Yes.
On the report?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Caulfield did a good job recapping what took place at the meeting. There was also a motion that we amend the ordinance based on a memorandum that was submitted by David Fenton to strike words relative to when fines are applied that they don't go to the animal control officer, that they go to that the city clerk is the custodian of. So that was one thing. Yeah, I understand, Councilor. I am going to support this ordinance. Is it different than what was submitted? Yes, it was. We adjourned 2 weeks ago to have the mayor, based upon Councilor Dakota's motion to meet with the Animal Advisory Committee, because there were some concerns. We were not all on the same page. There are some things in here I agree with. There are some things in here that I don't agree with. But what I do know is that we have to put some protections in place relative to pit bulls in the city. And I think by incorporating language and concerns from other members of the council that had concerns with this ordinance, it's a compromise. And I think that we need to move forward and put something in place. There is also a provision that includes a 6-month review to determine whether some things are working or some provisions are not. So we trying to work together and to put together an ordinance that is amenable to or agreeable to everybody, to all members of the council, and I think we achieved that. Is it a weakened version? It depends upon how you look at it. I'd like to move forward on it and send this to a public hearing, and there was an awful lot of work put in by the subcommittee, Council Caulfield, Council Dakota, members from the Humane Society, the City Council, the administration, and we made progress, and I think we'll continue to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what would be in order before we go actually back to the unfinished business is to approve the report of the subcommittee with the amended language on page 7 as noted by Councilor Elliott and by the chairman, Councilor Caulfield. Motion by Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Dakota to accept the report as a report of progress along with the amended language change. Councilor Mendonça.
I believe there was an additional amendment in the subcommittee from the solicitor regarding a change of who receives fines or registration.
That was in here.
Oh, that was
that's
in there.
here.
Okay,
That's right here. Thank you. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This particular muzzle law ordinance that should be taking place with the vote, I think we already have a vicious dog ordinance that I think is a good one. I think if we revamp the vicious dog ordinance, that you muzzle the vicious dogs, then I think that's what should be done. I don't think that we should be punishing responsible dog owners by inflicting a requirement or a punishment on a dog that didn't do anything wrong. I think a vicious dog is a vicious dog, no matter what breed it is. I know many pit bulldogs that look very vicious, but they're not. So I don't support muzzling these dogs. And as far as the training goes, I think that we're going to have a new counterfeit wave taking place within this city. It's going to be the counterfeit safe training papers. You're going to find so many counterfeit safe training papers out there. Someone can make a fortune on this new counterfeit thing. I'm telling you right now. Someone that's in the training of these dogs is going to do a remarkable business, and the only ones that are going to be compliant are the good people that take care of their dogs anyways. You're going to still have dogs out running the street. Those are the bad, vicious dogs. Those are because people could care less what their dog does, that their dog has the realm of the street. I'm going to tell you about training a dog. Let me tell you about training a dog. Now, this is something that I found with the love of God. I don't know how I found it, but it was in Saturday's paper, May 14th, right in the Sun. I happened to spot it. I don't always read everything. But a police dog was fired after attacking a jogger. I don't know how many people seen that. In Greenwich, Connecticut, Stamford officials say one of their police dogs was demoted and put in to be in a house pet because he attacked a jogger near the handler's home. Now, a 52-year-old woman required 30 stitches after the incident Monday when the German Shepherd dog named McGee He's been placed on a 14-day quarantine because the police say that a sergeant was putting McGee into the cruiser when the dog ran after the passing jogger and bit her in the leg, the arm, and the wrist. Was that not a trained dog by a police officer that bit a woman? Was that not a pit bull, but a German Shepherd dog? I mean, what do we say about that? So we can say anything we want about vicious dogs. They run in any size, any shape, any breed, any form. I know that the ultimate goal is to make this city safe. You know how you make the city safe? You enforce what's already in place. We have to appropriate enough money so that we have adequate coverage. Coverage, not people on the same shift that take place of each other when they're out on sick leave or a day off. We need, you know, an adequate number of hours that we have people that are going out there doing the job. I think we get 2 wonderful animal control people. I don't know who they report to. Are we going to move it under the police department? Has that happened? Will we do that? Who do they report to? Who holds them accountable? And is it possible we can, you know, do the job that's at hand with the vicious dog ordinance? That's all I have to say. I don't think that we should pick a certain breed and punish those wonderful owners that take good care of those. That's my opinion.
Councilman Donza? Again, this is just to accept the report of the subcommittee at this point. We're going to move back to the ordinance.
All right. In that case, I'll hold my comments till that.
Okay. Any other comments regarding the report of the subcommittee? All those in favor of accepting the report as a report of progress signify by saying aye. Opposed, the vote. Thank you. Moving on now with the regular agenda.
Mr. Mayor, is the council going to take a vote to send this to a public hearing?
No, now.
Oh, okay.
Now, we're going back to the regular agenda. The next item under unfinished business is the ordinance, Chapter 104, Section 104.29.1, responsible pit bull ownership. Again, this is the ordinance as amended in subcommittee. In City Council ordinance, an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, City of Lowell, Massachusetts, as amended with respect to Chapter 104 thereof, entitled Animals, Article 1, entitled Dogs, by adding a new section thereto to address requirements for responsible pit bull ownership. Motion by Councilor Elliott, seconded by Councilor Broderick, to waive the full reading. All those in favor of waiving the full reading signify by saying aye. Opposed to the vote. We refer this to a public hearing on June 14th. The chair recognizes Councilor Mendonça.
Since it's going to a public hearing, I'll just hold my comments until that time, so
Okay,
when we have the public hearing.
June 14th. Anyone else? Would we like to have a roll call on this, or?
No.
Or not? All those in favor of sending it to a public hearing?
A roll call to send it to a public hearing?
hearing.
Oh, no, that's all
No?
right.
Okay. All those in favor of sending it to a public hearing June 14th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed to vote. Public hearing is June 14th. I too want to thank those in attendance from the Animal Advisory Committee for being so patient and so cooperative with us. Thank you. Continuing on with the agenda, under the city manager, communication from manager, responses to council, motions and requests.
Right here, Mr.
Anyone
Mayor.
want to be heard? Council Caulfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I brought in a motion last week about the replicating the crosswalks in Drake. I think they were very attractive, and they'd be painted yellow with white borders. And the traffic engineer indicated that you're in violation of federal and state laws if you do that, and so forth. And I didn't think it would get anywhere anyways. But I just want to state, Beverly, Stoneham, Salem, Drake, and Tingsboro have painted crosswalks. And I just think it will be attractive, but more importantly, the motorists could see it much sooner, and the pedestrian would be protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, just in response to Councilor Caulfield, and Councilor Caulfield and I had an opportunity to speak briefly before the meeting, and I assured him that we are going to look for other ways that are in compliance that will achieve the same goal. And as I indicated to the councilor, it's a concern of mine that we simply don't appropriate enough money for any of our street painting, the sidewalk, the center lines, or the crosswalks. We really need to allocate more resources to that. But of course, resources is difficult. But I assured him, and I assure the council, that we are going to see what other options do exist that we feel more comfortable with, and they're affordable.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Anyone else on? Councilor Mendonça?
Regarding the issue of the meals tax, we have a report in our packet. And one thing that was concerning me was the third quarter decline from the previous quarter. And I assume that this is because the revenues of the businesses have gone down in addition to our own take of it. I don't know if the manager wants to comment on that, or...
I think that
Mr. Manager?
it is because the revenues of the businesses went down. I think traditionally the third quarter of the fiscal year is the slowest point for the restaurants, and it was a very bad winter. And
that being after the holidays?
After the holidays, the bad winter.
So,
in talking to some restaurant owners, not related to this, but related to other matters, they indicated, the ones I spoke to indicated it was a very bad winter.
So I guess it's still premature to make any conclusions based on this data. We really need multiple years. I just was concerned about it. I was opposed to it from the beginning, but
Right.
It is a fact now. So I just thought I'd get a little bit more information on it.
And we were other communities did it before we did, and those communities that did, and this is more anecdotal right now than, but as I recall, all of the communities that adopted this home rule or local option meals tax actually did better than expected the year before. But as Mr. Moses points out, a number of communities saw a drop-off this year. So I think we will need more time to.
Thanks.
Councilor Murphy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On that same issue, I do recall at the time that the previous year was tracking ahead, and so it may be, as the report states, due to the actual state estimates provided. But I think that for a real analysis of what's going on there, I think you also need really data from those communities that haven't adopted the meals tax for really to be of any use to us as to what the real impact of that tax is. If you just have, declining, we're tracking here at 13% less. If you just have those communities that have adopted the tax, you're really not getting an understanding of the full impact of that.
Mr. Manager?
Councilor, I don't disagree with you at all, but as I recall, the Department of Revenue does not, strangely enough, does not provide us with that, does not have that information. I believe we tried to get this before the council adopted the local option tax, and the advice we received from the Department of Revenue was that they did not track that. But we'll double check on that.
Well, yeah, I think that really ought to be a recommendation from the city, to understand fully what exactly is happening there.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on communications? Motion by Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Broderick to accept the communications placed on file. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed to vote. Next item, constable bond, one bond for term from January 4th, 2011 to January 7th, 2014. We have a communication from the city manager. This is for a Fred Correa, 11 Cow Pond Brook Road in Groton, Mass.
Move approval.
Move approval by Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilor Broderick. Roll call. Yes.
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 Thank you. Next item, communication from Planning Board, report zoning 550 Bridge Street with ordinance. Motion to accept the report, place on file, and refer the order to a hearing June 14th. Let me just give a quick first reading. In City Council ordinance, an ordinance amending code of the City of Lowell, Massachusetts, respect to Chapter 290 thereof entitled zoning by extending existing traditional mixed-use zoning district to include the area of 550 to 570 Bridge Street in Lowell. Motion to accept the report by Councilor Broderick, second by Councilor Elliott. Placed on file, refer to a hearing June 14th. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed to vote. Next item, in City Council vote, authorizing the approval and submission of the federal fiscal year 2011-2012 City of Lowell Annual Action Plan to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Whereas the City of Lowell is submitting a federal fiscal year 2011-2012 Annual Action Plan to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which plan will address the community development, housing needs, and priorities identified by the community. And whereas the federal fiscal year 2011-2012 Annual Action Plan calls for the anticipated expenditure of $4,072,840 in funding for the period beginning July 1st, 2011 and ending June 30th, 2012. And whereas the Lowell City Council determines that the proposed use of Community Development Block Grant Home Funds, Home Investment Partnership Program, and Emergency Shelter Grant Program funding is necessary and desirable in order to improve the economic and living conditions of the residents of the city. And whereas the annual action plan includes the anticipated expenditure of $4,072,840 in funding for the period beginning July 1st, 2011, and ending June 30th, 2012, which includes a total of $2,172,716 in CDBG, $1,049,073 in home, $146,501 in ESG, and $704,550 for HOPWA, which is housing opportunities for persons living with AIDS, for a total of $4,072,840 in federal grant funds. The annual plan also includes $45,000 in anticipated program income and $300,000 in unspent prior year funds, for a total of $4,417,840. Whereas the City Council determines that the proposed use of CDBG, Home Program, and Emergency Shelter Grant Program funding for the City of Lowell and the housing opportunities for persons living with AIDS funding for Middlesex County is necessary and desirable in order to improve the economic and living conditions of the residents of the city. Now therefore be it voted by the City Council of the City of Lowell as follows: that the proposed plan for the Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership, and the Emergency Shelter Grant Programs and the housing opportunities for persons living with AIDS grant is hereby endorsed, approved, and included in the federal fiscal year 2011-2012 City of Lowell Annual Action Plan to be submitted to the Department of Housing and Urban Development for its approval. Second reading by title. In City Council vote, authorizing the approval and submission of the federal fiscal year 2011-2012 City of Lowell Annual Action Plan to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. What's the wish of the council? Councilor Mercia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is the point of the meeting where I must disclose that I'm a member of the CTI Board of Directors, and they stand to generate some funds here. I had nothing to do with that, and I'm on the board with the Friends of the Council on Aging, and the Senior Center will get funds as well. Again, I had nothing to do with any of that, but I should disclose it.
Thank you. Councilman Danza?
Likewise, I just want to disclose that I have been on the board of Rebuilding Together, one of the recipients, proposed recipients in this year's plan.
Thank you. Councilor Elliott?
I'm not on any boards. Move approval.
Okay. Move approval, second by Councilor Dakota. Anyone? Councilor Dakota?
Yes, I'd just like to disclose I'm also on the CTI board and a resident at the Renaissance in the River property. Some funding for the park there.
Thank you. Councilor Caulfield?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a member of the YMCA. It's a wonderful organization that helps many, many people, but I just want to let you know I am a member of that.
Thank you. Councilor Broderick?
Member of the YMCA board and the Boys and Girls Club board.
Thank you. I'm also on Community Teamwork, Lowell Development Financial Corporation, MCCI, and a host of others that are probably mentioned here. So just to go on the record as well. Councilor Murphy?
Do we need to invoke the rule of necessity here, madams?
No, probably not.
Now, where there's no financial interest,
Right.
the simple disclosures are sufficient.
Councilor Murphy?
Thank you. I attend the West End gym on occasion.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mayor Milonazo.
Yes.
Councilor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Broderick.
Yes.
Councilor
Yes.
Caulfield. Councilor Dakota.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Martin. Councilor Mendoza.
Yes.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
8 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you. The last item under the city manager's portion of the agenda, in city council vote authorizing the city manager acting through the Department of Planning and Development to apply for, accept, and expend funds in the amount of $2,475,000 from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for lead hazard reduction. Whereas U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has made available to communities funds to provide lead-safe housing to low and moderate income property owners and tenants. And whereas the city of Lowell has used such funds to de-lead properties and to provide significant education, training, and outreach regarding the hazards of lead in homes. And whereas the city of Lowell will utilize the grant funds to de-lead at least 98 additional units in the greater Lowell Merrimack Valley area. Now therefore be it voted by the city council of the city of Lowell that the city manager on behalf of the city of Lowell and acting through the Department of Planning and Development is hereby authorized to apply for, accept, and expend funds in the amount of $2,475,000 from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for lead hazard reduction. Be it further voted that the city manager acting through the Department of Planning and Development be and hereby is authorized and directed to take the necessary actions to fully implement the planning and execution of various projects, programs pursuant to and in conformity with the lead hazard reduction grant program, and is further authorized to execute on behalf of the city of Lowell any and all documents as may be required in connection with the aforesaid application. Second reading by title. In city council vote authorizing the city manager acting through the Department of Planning and Development to apply for, accept, and expend funds in the amount of $2,475,000 from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for lead hazard reduction. What's the wish of the council, Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, just a comment on this vote. The council should be aware that there's been a substantial reduction, approximately $2 million, Adam, that the lead paint grant has been reduced by. And the other, just a point of clarification, just so everyone, I think the council is certainly aware of this. This program serves not only Lowell, but the greater Merrimack Valley, that the city is responsible for administering this grant for that entire area. But
yeah, this is, it should also be clarified, this is just the application. We have not been awarded this yet, and we're asking your permission to apply, and hopefully we will be successful as we have been in the last 4 cycles with this program. It's a 3-year grant. Historically, HUD has allowed us to apply for up to $3 million, and we have historically been funded at that $3 million level, so it ends up being $1 million a year. This year, they capped the amount we could apply for at the $2.4 million that we are applying for. So as a result, even if we are successful in obtaining the grant, it will result in a slightly reduced program relative to what we've had available for the past almost a dozen years now. And it is, again, a regional program. The reason it is a regional program, it has been for the last about 6 years, because about 6 years ago it became clear when HUD changed the criteria for applying for this grant that an application solely for the city of Lowell would be unlikely to be successful. And we have subsequently been successful 2 times with a regional approach, and now we feel confident again that our best chance of success to continue the program is to again have a regional program.
Thank you. Motion by Councilor, Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager. I'm just curious as to how you come before this board to apply, accept, and expend a grant. You're asking us to vote on this because this is what you'll want to apply and accept and expend this grant, but yet you can go out and solicit bids without coming before the council. I don't know how you can do that. And I'm referring to I know it's not on the agenda, I probably shouldn't say it, but I know that, there goes the gavel, but it's just a question. I mean, I think something so important as to solicit bids, you know, you can go out and solicit bids without coming before the council. How can you, I think that's important, and yet you did that without coming to us. And I'm not trying to micromanage the city, but how can you come before us when you are applying for a grant, which I say go after any grant that you can get, and you're asking permission from us to do it, but yet you don't need permission to go and solicit bids for a cell tower. I don't understand how, that to me is more important, and we should have known about that, I think, before it actually happened. I know that. I know that.
You made your point. You made your point, but it's really not.
Right.
No.
Statutorily, I'll defer to the solicitor on this, but for us to apply, apply, accept, and expend does require us to come to the council. The other matters do not.
Gee, I should think we should be changing that law. I don't know.
Motion by Councilor Murphy, seconded by Councilor Martin. Roll call.
Mayor Milonazo?
Yes.
Councilor Murphy?
Yes.
Councilor Broderick?
Yes.
Councilor
Yes.
Caulfield? Councilor Dakota? Councilor Elliott?
Yes.
Councilor Martin?
Yes.
Councilor Mendonça?
Yes.
Councilor Mercia?
Yes.
9 yeas.
Under petitions, item number 10, Comcast 2 to 3 inch PVC on Lewis Street, National Grid 155 feet on Hurd Street. Refer to a public hearing June 14th by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Dakota. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed to vote. Pole location, National Grid 1 pole on Perry Street, National Grid 1 pole on Parker Street. Motion by Councilor Elliott, seconded by Councilor Caulfield. Refer to a public hearing for June 14th. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed to vote. Thank you. Moving on to the motion section once again. First motion by Councilor Elliott. City Council requests the city manager contact the postmaster relative to the possibility of relocating mailboxes on main roads, Varnum Ave and Perrence, closer to property to prevent vandalism. Second by Councilor Rita Mercia. Councilor Elliott.
I know the motion needs some explanation, but essentially up on Farnham Ave, if you travel from the Tingsboro line down to at least Old Ferry Road, you will see every single mailbox has been bashed off off the mailbox. Some, and I feel bad for people because they're getting frustrated. They have been frustrated. Some people just put the mailbox in a cement bucket, or bucket filled with cement, because they know it's going to get bashed and it's going to move over. Elderly gentleman put up 2 steel bollards in front of his. Driving down tonight, one individual, they just decided to duct tape the thing because they know it's going to get hit. Some 2, some 3, some 4 times. I don't know what can be done, Mr. Manager. I don't even know if this is the appropriate way to handle it. I don't know if the postmaster will do that because it is a driving route. But a couple of neighbors are, and rightfully so, they're frustrated. Then any given night, their mailbox could be knocked off, and it gets expensive. So I don't know if there's anything you can do, Mr. Manager. I don't know if the post, if they'll do it. I know that'll change to a walking route, but I told residents that I would put this motion forward and see if something can be done. I'm sure it's kids that are just driving around with a bat, knocking them off, but I told them I would try. Thank you.
Anyone else on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed, it's a vote. Next motion by Councilor Broderick. Motion, request the city manager contact Middlesex Community College and UMass Lowell regarding possible student participation with Lowell Telecommunications to initiate and facilitate televising neighborhood meetings on LTC. Seconded by Councilor Caulfield. Councilor Broderick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the good fortune of covering the grand opening for LTC a week and a half ago, and it's a remarkable space. It's much more open, and there's new equipment. And listening to people that have been involved, Councilor Martin, who's I think our representative, the chair of the subcommittee here, in the next step, they've got the government side where people are watching us at home right now, our boards and our meetings, but what the next push is on the community side and getting community involvement. And Anne Marie Page was there from the Centerville Neighborhood Action Group in a discussion where they said, geez, wouldn't it be nice if we could get assistance and get out and start getting out in the neighborhoods, whether it's, people videotaping Little League games. These are all going to have to be replayed, obviously, but maybe start with neighborhood groups. They're more organized, and there's students at Middlesex. Jay Linehan from Middlesex was talking about some of his students that they're going to encourage to get down there and use the equipment and get some experience. There's all kinds of resources that won't cost any money and that can help get some of these neighborhood the meetings out into to the folks that can't get out, whether it's because of work schedules or because of just not being able to get out of their house as easy as they used to. And that's the gist of it. It's something that shouldn't cost any money, hopefully, and that might help get the message out and get community awareness.
Thank you. Anyone else on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed to the vote. Next motion by Councilor Mendonça. Motion, City Council requests the city manager have the law department draw the proper vote to implement the recommendations of the Planning and Development Office relative to the vacant foreclosed property ordinance. Seconded by Councilor Mercia. Councilor Mendonça.
This is actually from a response to my motion, which was in the packet for April 26th. And there were a couple of recommendations from DPD in there that, although it wasn't favorable to my original proposal, which I still disagree with, but I think we should at least implement what they did recommend. And there were two things. One was eliminating the posting for occupied properties, because according to them, when that went up, the tenants stopped paying rent and they became squatters, and they created a problem to get the building turned around if the people living there who weren't paying rent. And the second one was to change the ordinance so that the responsibility for registering the property was with the foreclosing entity and not necessarily the owner, because some people are trying to keep their homes, and the bank was using this as a club, that they were in violation of some city ordinance and using that as a reason to proceed with a foreclosure because they were out of compliance. That is, the owner was out of compliance. This way, it's up to the bank to register the property. They'll be the ones that are out of compliance. If they don't do so, it doesn't necessarily count against the current owner who's trying to keep their property. So that's all I'm asking, is that we go ahead and implement the recommendations of DPD in that communication that was itself dated April 22nd.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Mendonça. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed to the vote. Next motion is actually a joint motion filed by Councilor Murphy and Councilor Mercia. Motion, City Council requests the city manager report on the funding for municipal pools in fiscal year 2012. Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a pretty straightforward motion. This was brought up actually at the Centerville Neighborhood Action Committee last Monday, I think it was, by Mr. Page. And it's to get an idea of what's expected for this budget. If it's not expected, that those funds would be able to be raised privately to make sure that we do budget for it. Because, and I know the manager would agree that we do need more recreational opportunities here in the city, particularly during the summer, and in potentially work opportunities too for the slightly older young people in terms of lifeguards and that sort of thing. But I would defer to my colleague to the right.
Yes.
Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Councilor Murphy, for being supportive of this motion. This is very important when we talk about the youth of our city, and tomorrow evening with the Board of Parks is the meeting to extend the hours in the parks for an hour for 11 parks. And I will be there to support that and speak on behalf of the Parks and Recreation Subcommittee and the motion being referred over there. And in conjunction with that is the fact that we need to get these kids off the street and into activities. And it seems that every year, especially the most crucial, vital place is the South Common Pool, and we never can seem to keep that open financially. I remember Councilor Caulfield utilized his wisdom and tried to generate some funds, and he did through community teamwork, and we generated $45,000 to keep that park open years ago before you were here, Mr. Manager. And then last year we had a bank come forward from Eastern Bank from Central Street, and it was very nice that they did that. But I'm wondering, where do we sit with the pools this year? It's very important for the kids.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, as Councilor Murphy indicated, I think I was very vocal at the Centerville neighborhood meeting when a similar question came up. I don't think, similar to the street painting and similar to some of the other issues that have been raised tonight, I don't think we do enough. I think there's quite a bit more we should be doing in a number of areas, including recreation. And I was very vocal with that I think we need to do more for our young people to give them options to, for the summer, particularly for the summer months, but probably year-round. And I know that Councilor Martin has been certainly an advocate for this in the past as well. With regards to the pool, we're doing two things. One is we're going to do some fundraising again this year, or we're looking to. We've been contacted by people. How can I contribute because of the fundraising that's been done in the past, especially last year with the help of Eastern Bank. So we've already heard from the Lowell plan that they will be a fiscal agent for people and organizations and businesses that wish to donate for keeping the pools open. Beyond that, the directive that I've given to Mr. Moses as he's going through the budget is to work the opening the pools into this year's budget. The number of hours they'll be open may depend upon some of that fundraising we do, but it's important to me that I think each of the years that I've been here as city manager, we've tried to keep the pools open. Maybe not all of them and maybe not as many hours, but it's an important service that we provide to our young people and to our families throughout the city. So that will be included within the budget this year.
Do you think that I should schedule a Parks and Recreation subcommittee, or would you just want to give that report to the council?
I'd be happy to. I think it might be worthwhile to have a Parks and Recreation subcommittee meeting at some point in early June, early to mid-June.
Okay.
This, of course, will come through in the budget.
Yes.
But beyond that, I think it's always worthwhile to have a meeting of the subcommittee in June so that we can update the subcommittee and then hence the council on the upcoming summer programs.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed to the vote. The last motion of the evening by Councilor Dakota. Motion. City Council requests the city manager to review update policies in order to improve abutter neighborhood notification during all stages of development. Seconded by Councilor Mercia. Seconded by everybody. Councilor Dakota. Oh, you're right.
Thank you. Obviously, tonight's meeting is evidence of the need to improve some of the notification processes that we use. It seems in the last year, I'm noticing that as we are developing projects and properties, the concern for the residents, even if they don't like the project or property, their concern is primarily that they did not feel as if they were part of the process. They weren't notified in advance enough. So I know we talked about the foundation issue. I also understand that no notification is required when we lease out space, although it is required for selling space. So I think a review of all the policies and then would be helpful, and I'd like to see it presented to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed to the vote. Before we adjourn, I just want to remind everyone it's Memorial Day weekend coming up, and we have a number of events. Councilor Caulfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Saturday morning at the Lad Whitney Monument, and then at the Memorial Auditorium, there will be veteran services. And then Sunday at the VFW at 10 a.m., followed by the Polish American Veterans Memorial Services at the Polish PAV on Colbert Street. And then at Sunday at 1 o'clock, the Greek American Legion. There's services as well. And then on Monday, the St. Louis Veterans, I believe that's at 9 a.m. at Enel Street. And then at the Portuguese American Veterans at St. Anthony's Church, there'll be a mass at 11 a.m., followed by a parade down to the monument. And I didn't make the ceremonies last Sunday at the cemetery. I had family commitments, but I urge my colleagues, try to be there at one of those memorial services. The veterans were there for you.
Thank you. Anything else? Motion to adjourn by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilor Elliott. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed to vote. Thank you.